to Sochi with its humid subtropical climate, which is more wet sub-aqua climate for today. 13 days of rain on average in September here in this part of the world. We've probably had about 13 days already so far this morning, but qualifying should get underway very shortly ahead of round 15 in this 2021 season. It's a 3.6 mile track and it's drying rather nicely at the moment. Top speed of 211 miles an hour in the dry, 2 DRS zones as well, but those DRS zones have been disabled because the current conditions say wet track. It was collided at turn 2 and Jolyon Palmer taking out the Haas at 1 of 10 out of 24 retirements here to take place on lap 1. Here's another one. Lance Stroll on the outside of Charles Leclerc getting tagged by the Ferrari in last year's race and disappearing into the barriers at turn 4. And here's a great overtaking move from Alex Albon on Antonio Giovinazzi in 2020. If you're late enough on the brakes, you can certainly get past at the end of the back straight. Now the tyre compounds for this year here, exactly the same as last year, C5, C4 and C3. We might need those slick tyres by the end of qualifying if it doesn't rain again. We'll start on the intermediate tyres. The track is drying, but it's not dry enough for slick tyres just yet. And this is the scene here then in Sochi by the shores of the Black Sea. The current track temperature 17 degrees, the air temperature 14 degrees. Paul di Resta alongside me. At one stage this morning we didn't think we'd get qualifying underway. We are a lot more hopeful now, Paul. You're even starting to smile and look forward to this.
Yeah, we are. I mean, the weather window is coming right at the right time. We're back out. We're going to be on intermediates, I would think, straight away when we get into this session. Of course, they want to get a lap in their belt, but you can see there's some small rivers that they've got to contend with. But of course, with red flags, with people not knowing how this track is in the wet, we haven't had much run. I think we had one run at one point a few years back where the guys got out there, but not everybody went out because the weather is normally quite stable at this part of the world.
Yeah, we had a session delayed once because of oil on the track as well, where it got very slippy, but I'm thinking it could be quite greasy today, that track surface, and here it is right now. We can see it around turn 3, which is a fearsome corner in the dry, but no one knows how turn 3 should be taken in the wet.
Well, all the simulations will give them that impression, but of course the driver's feeling when you're sitting an inch off the ground, lying down with that 1,000 horsepower, the qualifying mode that you've got. You know, we'll wait and find out, but you know, it could trip somebody up, and that could be the difference between Hamilton getting pole today, likes of Lando Norris being a bit braver as he was in Spa because he's got nothing to lose, to nail it. And you know, when you're up against a championship battle, it's very hard. Obviously, last time out, Daniel Ricciardo won in Monza. He's full of high spirit, but after a difficult day tomorrow, he'll be hoping that the wet suits him a bit better.
Daniel Ricciardo has closed the qualifying head-to-head to 6-8 in Lando Norris's favour at the moment. Kimi Raikkonen is back after missing the last couple of races after testing positive for COVID. Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon locked at 7-all in their qualifying head-to-head battle. And Charles Leclerc could seal the season battle with Carlos Sainz today. Likewise, Mick Schumacher against Nikita Mazepin. But Leclerc, by taking a fourth power unit of the season, is required to start the race at the back of the grid, as is this man, Max Verstappen, as well. So how much will we see of Leclerc and Verstappen in this qualifying session?
Yeah, I mean, what would you benefit from Max running around there and putting mileage on the engine? You know, you could damage the car. Would that be the right thing to do, to have a rebuild? I think they would go out, get a lap under the belt, and make sure the FIA are satisfied that the rule they can go, but it's going to be completely different conditions tomorrow, and what have you got to gain? Yeah. Maybe depending on where you qualify one's position because of the way the rules are written, which I'm sure you'll explain at some point, Crofty. But you know, maybe Leclerc, you want to see how that new Ferrari engine's working, because of course the drivability in the wet may be completely different, and it's data that Ferrari needs for next year, and I think that's why they've introduced it at this point in the season. They've got 8 races to go.
You could go to the sporting regulations, you could look at Article 35, I think it is, that covers the starting grid, and you can make your own mind up as to exactly how Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen should line up if they're both required to start at the back of the grid. But the advice that I am given, and the thinking that Michael Massey, the race director, is having at the moment, is that it will be decided on the order of qualifying. So Max Verstappen, if he's ahead of Charles Leclerc by more than 3 places, will start. in 19th, and Charles Leclerc will start in 20th, because of course Max, not just going to the back of the grid because of the engine penalty, has a 3-place penalty after the collision with Lewis Hamilton to serve as well.
Either of these two guys line up on the back of the grid. They're on the last row, so when you get into qualifying, unless we see anything dramatic happen today, and somebody has to take power units and all the rest, and how it will all come, you know, what you're going to gain as you get into turn 2, which is effectively the first corner you break here, it becomes a bit of a mess. And I think for them, it's a way of navigating your way through the traffic, and from that point, it's the impact you're going to make to the end of the race where they're going to be. Max certainly isn't going to be getting his elbows out the first corner, because why does he need to do that? There's absolutely more risk than reward at that point. He needs to think about the end of the race and how he's going to pick people up, and I'm sure they will do a counter strategy to try and do that. And of course, the disappointing thing, I guess, in Red Bull's favour is not necessarily the tyre on in Q2, which is normally the one you carry into Q3 for the top 10, so some people have been soft. They've got a free tyre choice tomorrow if it stays wet.
If it stays wet. And at the moment, a mixture of intermediates, and in the case of Fernando Alonso, wet weather tyres. Max Verstappen's coming out of his garage and going down the pit lane, so we should head down to Karun Chandok. Afternoon, Karun.
Afternoon, Coffee, Paul, everyone at home. Yes, Max following Lance Stroll just past me here in the pit lane. It has started drizzling again, guys. We had that band of sunshine almost for 45 minutes, but it has started drizzling once again in the pit lane. Fernando Alonso seemed to be the only one, Coffee, on a set of wet. We haven't seen any Formula 1 cars running here in the wet, so it is a bit of a journey into the unknown for these drivers. We'll have to see if the weather stops raining, which is expected to do in the next 10 minutes. They're hoping to have slicks on for Q3.
And we're all holding our breath watching the cars going round turn 3. That was Max Verstappen making his way there, and just coming out of the right-hander at turn 16, Kimi Raikkonen getting all squirrely as well. It does look a bit greasy, that surface.
Oh, it's definitely greasy. There's plenty of spray out there as well, but it's a low grip surface, which is why we've got the softest range of the compound available that Pirelli bring. And of course, everything about this track is all about exits. You need to get the car stopped, you need to think about exits, and you need to be kind of on that white line. You can see the green AstroTurf. It's kind of like the fake grass. The water sits in that.
I guess no significant rain expected for the rest of quali 1.
Good news.
So I was going to say the water sits in that, and you just don't get traction. So you want to stay off the white lines, but of course when you get down here, you can't pick yourself off the rubber. You can't go wide, you can't go on the inside, because it's just all about getting your way through. And look, he's staying away from those curbs and on board through turn 3 for the first time.
Well done, Carlos Sainz.
He's flat. I said to Karun, oh, there was a small lift there. I said to Ant earlier, it's going to be flat in the way, and he was like, no, never. I think Carlos Sainz has just done that nearly in the first lap, so I would suspect the guys with the big downforce, they'll definitely be doing it in lap 2.
And Carlos Sainz might be a bit more nervous than most around this track. Don't forget, last year, turn 2 crash as he tried to come back onto the track. Turn 10 crash in free practice 1, and in 2015 had a big crash, didn't he, at turn 13 in FP3. He's had some big moments around this circuit as Carlos Sainz. He's had points as well, and at the moment the longest point scoring streak on the grid. Last 7 races he scored points.
Grip's incredible though. Charles Leclerc behind him, he's done a much better sector 1, almost a second quicker than what that Sainz had done. But that Ferrari looking nicely hooked up, but more importantly the surface looks like it's given the drivers confidence. This is probably the bit that's the most tricky, because you get that inside wheel locking, and it's not really the inside wheel because we're turning right, but we have to turn left before that corner, and that's where the top speed's coming from, and that's where he had that big shot when he went into the barrier, lost a wheel and underneath the Tech Pro barrier.
It was a frightening moment. He came back to race the next day and retired with brake failure eventually after making his way up into the points. Here Gasly with a 1:51.5 has a time on the board, 3.5 seconds quicker than his teammate Yuki Tsunoda. Last time Yuki Tsunoda was racing here was in F2. He took pole and finished second in the feature race last year. Sainz goes second fastest, half a second down on Gasly. You could feel how tentative it was riding on board.
Okay, in case you expect a bit more rain sooner than expected, important to close all laps.
So Williams saying we can expect a bit more rain, no significant rain, say Alpine. Charles Leclerc with a brand new power unit in that Ferrari of his goes fastest into the low 150s, and we can ride on board with Sergio Perez. Big job for Sergio Perez today to get as high up the grid as possible and be that main challenge to Mercedes in tomorrow's race.
Absolutely. I'm just going to put it in simple terms, locked at outside front. That's going to be a very painful corner, because you can just see you can get the car turned. But to put that message that we heard from Latifi's engineer, he's basically saying make sure every lap you close on, make sure you don't back off at the wrong time, because these could be crucial. If it rains, the session could be over because you could be going to full wets for the next one. So, you know, get your gaps and just slowly but surely build it up. And Perez crosses the line, only good enough for P5, and that's going to be way further down than what he'd want to do. But Gasly, Leclerc, they're all just doing consecutive laps. They keep pushing because the temperature's obviously there.
Lando Norris goes into the 1:49s with the fastest time so far. They're all on the intermediates, Paul, except Fernando Alonso, who's still on the wet weather tyres. Now, Alonso is way off the pace at the moment on those wet weather tyres, but might that be a masterstroke from the experienced Alpine driver, in that he's going around off the pace at the moment, putting pressure on himself to get a better time later, but he's not using up those intermediate tyres at this stage.
No, he's not using them up, like you say, and I think that's Verstappen's probably qualifying over Crofty. Like we said, you know, he's been out there, done what he had to do. You can see, I mean, if this was a race, I mean, that's not a very nice pit entry, is it? You would see probably some cars in the wall there.
But I just wonder if Alonso... Oh, as Giovinazzi spins and very nearly gets collected by Charles Leclerc coming out of turn 16. When we saw Kimi Raikkonen getting a bit squirrely a few moments ago, Giovinazzi's overcooked it, and that was almost it for both Giovinazzi, who had a big crash in practice yesterday, and for Charles Leclerc, who was very soon on the scene and would rather not be, I'm sure.
I mean, all that would take as a car to pop Giovinazzi to roll off the brake and go where Leclerc was going, and of course you don't stop as well as you do in the dry and the wet. If you lock the front, that would have been a disappointment for the two Italian brands.
Yeah, Antonio, our hearts as well as yours were very much in our mouth at that stage. We can see how it looked on board with Charles Leclerc. There goes Giovinazzi spinning around. Yeah.
And you can just see how close that was. But Leclerc on all the right bits of the track compared to Giovinazzi. Leclerc got the car in. He was thinking about the exit. He wanted to carry the speed through this corner, and that's turn 16 on the exit. But that's what I'm saying. If he just let go of the brake there, the Italian newspapers, I'm sure, would have been too complimentary.
Yes, Gazzetta della Crunch, I think would have been the headline. Lewis Hamilton set a couple of purple sectors on his latest lap. And I would imagine as he comes around the final corner, this might be the fastest time. His teammate Valtteri Bottas in the 1:48. Hamilton 1.1 seconds quicker for the 1:46.9. This track will start to dry out with more and more cars going around it pretty rapidly.
Yeah, I think what you're going to see here is just rapidly going, and the drivers getting confidence because they just don't have any data point from years ago to even look at, even the videos to see where the grip is. But confirmation that's Verstappen's qualifying session over. And that, you know, it's not great to see when you're a fan and you're watching. Unfortunately, we see the hype of what qualifying was going to be because he's got that engine penalty. He's at the back. That's a sacrifice of what happened to him in Silverstone when he lost that engine in that crash. But he'll live to fight another day, and he'll be the one rapidly charging his way through, hopefully tomorrow, putting on some great moves and giving us some great entertainment.
I'm sure he will be, and trying to emulate, or even better, what he produced here in 2018 when he started 19th and finished 5th on that particular occasion. Sergio Perez can see the blinking rain lights and the harvesting going on from the rear of the Alfa Romeo of Antonio Giovinazzi as he applied the brakes at turn 13. And there are periods on this track where that blinking rain light comes in very, very handy indeed, so that you can actually see what's ahead of you through the gloom, peering down through the gloom to the pit lane. Karun Chandok.
Yeah, it is a bit gloomy and cloudy here, Crofty. It's also very cold. The track temperature only 17 degrees. Now, one thing to watch out for, guys, is do these drivers start to come in now and into the last 9 minutes? Do they come in for hot intermediate tyres? And this is a theme we've seen across the season. If you put on a hot set of tyres, even if they're not new, which they will have today, but let's say into Q2, into Q3, a hot used set of inters is often better than a set that's been on track and cooling down. So keep an eye out for drivers coming in and doing a quick pit stop. That's why the mechanics were drying out the pit boxes in the pit lane.
yes, so the cars can stop even at 60 kilometres an hour. It's very difficult to stop on that very wet concrete. Fernando Alonso, by the way, a couple of minutes ago came in, got rid of those wet weather tyres, and he is on the intermediates as Lando Norris gets the power down a bit too early and almost sideways over the line. Finishes 5th fastest at the end of his latest lap. His teammate Daniel Ricciardo goes 8th fastest. In the bottom 5, Max Verstappen, who is out of the car and out of qualifying and starting at the back because of that engine penalty. Mick Schumacher, Fernando Alonso, Antonio Giovinazzi and George Russell. If you're new to qualifying, we lose the bottom 5 at the end of the final flying laps once the checkered flag is out.
Lando Norris not looking quite as confident as he was in Spa, is he? That car is just not quite as alive as it was. It was obviously rapid around there, and I kind of understand why it was rapid around Spa, because look how quick it was in Monza on the lower downforce in the dry.
Long way to go, Paul, in this, but it's worth mentioning Nikita Mazepin in his home race, currently 15th and out of the relegation zone. Nikita Mazepin, the only driver not to have reached Q2 at any race so far this season. And boy, would he like that record to go. The O to go, as it were, at the end of this session in his home race. Talking of O's to go, George Russell, Nicholas Latifi has out-qualified George Russell now this season, as has Yuki Tsunoda, following the sprint qualifying race, as it were, at Monza last time out. So the O's have gone, and we'll see what Latifi and Tsunoda can do against their teammates on this occasion. Perez making his way rapidly round the track whilst the mechanics just start to do a little bit of work on Max Verstappen's car. Not much they can do, of course, because we're under parc fermé conditions.
I guess the only work that car will be required to do is probably give her a little polish and tuck her into bed tonight.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, Valtteri Bottas wide awake and eyes wide open as he has to negotiate his way round the bollards and rejoin the track safely after getting it all a little bit wrong into turn 2, I should say. That's Lance Stroll just going off in the Aston Martin.
I'm going to say that chicane becomes a bit... You're going to pay a bit more attention in the way, aren't you? Not going to go charging through there like Carlos Sainz did last year. And try and get back on the track. Perez has just done the fastest first set of anybody. We saw that slipstream he got down braking into turn 2, which is effectively the first time you brake on this track, because turn 1 is just a bit of a nothing. But Perez, he's building his way into it. He's just done the best middle sector as well. But we're fear for Perez, or what are people going to do? They're probably going to get in like Karun Sate and stick a nice new fresh set of tyres on. If he finishes this lap, he'll be very tight to do another one, but that car should easily do enough to get through, shouldn't it?
It certainly should do. 5.5 minutes, just under. Raikkonen, Mazepin, Giovinazzi, Schumacher and Verstappen in the bottom 5. Verstappen, who started every race so far this season in the top 3, but not this week. Karun Chandler.
Guys, just as you were saying, Paul, about the hot tyres, both McLarens, Carlos Sainz and Lance Stroll, have all been in for a hot new intermediate, so keep an eye on those times in these final 5 minutes.
But is that a little bit too early to go for those hot tyres?
No, it's not, because what you would try to do is probably have a push back off push. To just do one lap is quite hard, isn't it? Just in case you get a yellow flag, in case you lock a wheel, in case you put a wheel off track, and that's where it is. Fernando Alonso just pips up to P3. Now we know he's out of sync. He's a bit later in the queue of that because he started the session on a wet tyre, but I mean, it can go so long, can't it? It's almost a bit like Spa. You know, you can cross the line with 15 seconds to go. We can still wait another 2 minutes until we see who's going to progress.
As long as you get to the line to start your final flying lap before the checkered flag, you're allowed to go on and complete it. As we watch Mick Schumacher, currently 19th fastest, but setting personal best times through the first 2 sectors. Where can he put that Haas car? 17th, can't get out of the bottom 5, so he'll go for a cool-down lap now and then another flying lap in a moment.
Nicholas Latifi doing an absolutely superb job. If you compare him to George Russell, he's way up the road. Latifi in P6, George Russell in P15, and Latifi's just been in the pits to get another set of tyres, so that was on the first set. Like for like, I would say. Maybe George not having a clean run, but he'll be happy. Daniel Ricciardo, he'll be looking to improve a bit more. Maybe that's why he fitted that new set, as you can see. Bottas up into P3 on a 47.3, still 9/10 off what Perez has done. I'm sure Red Bull would be happy if that continued to be the progression through this.
Nicholas Latifi's boss, Jos Capito, Williams, saying this week what a great job Latifi's doing and how people don't appreciate the great job that he's doing in comparison to the headlines that have come via George Russell. Maybe now that he's out-qualified, Russell will get to see, under a little less pressure, Latifi shine a bit more.
Where he can build his reputation, he's got 8 races to throw everything at it. If he can beat George Russell on a half of that, then you start to give him more respect. Then you can say, yes, comfortably, you're the right person to stay there. But if he doesn't do that, then I guess that's where Formula 1 you will always be judged. You will always say, should somebody else get a chance at that? But as you said, Latifi had that confidence boost last time out in the sprint in Monza. He was able to do it, although it wasn't the like-for-like qualifying session. But listen, that's how the stats say, isn't it? And on a piece of paper, it looks a bit different when you go away from the weekend.
Yeah, listen, he's got a 1 by his name in the column now. That's all he cares about. Sebastian Vettel, who finished 5th in yesterday's dry free practice 2, goes 5th fastest overall at the moment, just behind Fernando Alonso, who's 4th fastest. And Paul mentioned yellow flags becoming something of a problem and an issue. And you're right, there is a yellow flag waving in sector 1, and it is Sergio Perez who stopped for a moment. So anyone who was approaching the scene, Latifi and Vettel, well, Vettel was on a cool-down lap, Latifi might be on a flyer at the moment, they would have been impeded by that yellow flag, having to slow down because of someone else's misfortune. Perez is the fastest driver at the moment, but he had a spin down at turn 2, and that's why the yellow flags came out. 2 minutes to go. Valtteri Bottas now goes fastest by 5/100ths of a second from Sergio Perez, and we're on board with Daniel Ricciardo, who compared to his teammate Lando Norris has not necessarily had the pace at all times so far this weekend. Norris moves out of his way because he's not on a flying lap, and Ricciardo is.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see they're just kind of taking the normal racing line on all the rubber that was put down yesterday. It was a very nice day we had here, very different, but you can see staying away from the exit curve down into the final 2 corners. It's a better lap from Ricciardo, but is it going to be enough? He's going to have to do another push because he's only going to get one more time and one more chance after this, and I'm sure the team will be on the radio telling him to keep going.
Yeah, he's going to have to keep pushing and hope that he's got enough energy stored in those batteries to push hard, because Ricciardo only 10th fastest, Stroll goes 9th fastest, George Russell set a personal best first sector, and Kimi Raikkonen still very much at risk as he crosses the line, only 15th fastest so far.
Hamilton's just come across Mazepin at turn 10. That's kind of toward the end of the sector 2 time, and they were on board with Russell. We'll just listen to see how he's dealing with it. The 2 green sectors, it shows he's on a much better lap here, and I think it's 1.3 seconds up so far. So if you can do your calculations quickly, that'll give you an idea where he is. He just lost a little bit of time there. Yeah, he's down to a second property. So this, again, he's only going to get one more chance after this. So maybe he saved the best until last.
This might be good enough for about 11th and 12th for George Russell as it stands at the moment. Crosses the line, comes at you very fast indeed. It's only good enough for 15th. George Russell, who's been knocked out in Q1 only once this season, is on the verge of another Q1 knockout.
And there's a lot of green sectors going on down the back, because that's where people have taken the new tires, like Karun was talking about. Look at the traffic jam in the final part of the lap.
And making his way through that traffic jam is Yuki Tsunoda, and Tsunoda needs to put a bit of distance between himself and the relegation zone, and hasn't managed to do that. Crossing the line will be Sergio Perez to start another lap. Valtteri Bottas will get one more lap in, and just Antonio Giovinazzi can get another lap in as well, and he needs to, because he's down in 18th. Lando Norris we're on board with now, trying to make his move a little bit further up the timing charts, and it's currently Bottas, Perez and Hamilton who are the top 3.
So both Ferraris, the only cars to take the flag so far, so that was badly timed by them, because you don't want to be the first ones to take the flag. But you can see Leclerc down in P11 at the moment, but of course that's not where he's going to start with that engine penalty. But you can see the screen, all the drivers were tracking, they're all up, so the track is improving because of the temperature they've got. Lando Norris, that'll secure him P4.
That's the big key as to how the track is now improving. Lando Norris moves into the top 4. So next across the line will be Kimi Raikkonen, as I mentioned, back after a couple of races, but it's another Q1 knockout for Kimi Raikkonen, only 16th fastest, as we watch Mick Schumacher now on his way down that back straight. One more big braking zone to go, and then a series of slow corners, and Mick Schumacher, he's got about half a second to try and make up to get his Haas into Q2 for what will be a 3rd time this season. Hamilton, meanwhile, is setting purple sectors, first sector and second sector, and is absolutely flying in the wet as Sebastian Vettel, former pole sitter of course here in Russia, goes 4th fastest overall. George Russell very much at risk as he goes 11th fastest. Better lap from George, puts him at a daylight between himself and the bottom 5. Now Mick Schumacher across the line stays down in 17th, so poor qualifying for him as Alonso goes 7th fastest and just ahead of Carlos Sainz, and Hamilton, as expected, with those first purple sectors, first and second sectors, goes quickest overall. Yuki Tsunoda next across the line, he's still at risk, he's only 15th. Can Nikita Mazepin get his hat out of the bottom 5? The answer is no. He's 19th and slowest because Verstappen didn't set a time, and that should be that for qualifying. The two Williams drivers have both made it out of the bottom 5 and through into Q2. We have lost Kimi, we have lost Mick, we've lost Antonio, Nikita and Max, who was expected to be out in that bottom 5 because he didn't set a time and didn't need to.
No, he didn't, but I think we can easily say that Williams is a very good car in the wet. Rightly so, they went up, but good job by Latifi. That was a good enough lap for him. I think the person will take confidence because he didn't get another lap in at the very end. He set that time very early on compared to others with Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, so that car's obviously working very well.
He was 1 second out from Q2, but really good improvement.
Beep, 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 beep.
Beep.
Shoot.
No need for the bleep machine. He's providing his own this week. Mick Schumacher, who's out, but he does clinch the season head-to-head qualifying at Haas against Nikita Mazepin. So after that first part of qualifying, Kimi Räikkönen in 6 of his last 7 races has made his way out in Q1. Mick Schumacher, Nikita Mazepin, Antonio Giovinazzi and Max Verstappen joined them, and Hamilton was quickest.
Completely blocked.
Welcome back to Sochi. First part of qualifying is over. We mentioned that Sergio Perez had a moment down at turn 2. This was that moment to spin and plonking over the sausage curves. Shouldn't have done too much damage to his car, but obviously did quite a bit of damage to his lap time on that occasion. Still finished 3rd fastest overall behind Bottas and Hamilton. His teammate Verstappen out in Q1 for the first time since Italy 2019. They're taking engine penalties, of course, and Nicholas Latifi 3 times in 4 races now. He's made it through to Q2. Let's focus in on McLaren for a while, though. Their team boss Andreas Seidl is with us on the pit wall. Andreas, great to speak to you this afternoon. I bet you never thought qualifying would get going, but you've got 2 cars safely through to Q2, so I bet you're glad that it did.
Yeah, good afternoon from the people. Happy. First sector completed of the qualifying. Now of course have to do it again to make sure we go through to 43.
Andreas, it's Paul. I see that a turn 2 incident's been reported upstairs involving Daniel Ricciardo and Lance Stroll. How did you see it?
As always, I need to wait before making any comments. I need to study the videos after the session before I can comment on it.
Both drivers got through to Q2 though. Lance Stroll accusing Daniel Ricciardo of blocking him. Has Daniel got the pace this weekend? There's been quite a big disparity, hasn't there, between himself and his teammate Lando Norris?
But I think we need to look into also how the yesterday went, especially free practice 2, with the issue we had with one of the power units on Daniel's car. We only started the second session 20 minutes late, which then put him on the back foot, so he couldn't do his ramp plan, and that's why he ended up in the classification where he ended up. I think he's, as we have seen also now in these first laps, he's on the pace, and I think we have everything with both cars now to get through to qualify.
And very briefly, Andreas, how difficult and how tricky is it to get the right tyres on the right car at the right time in these conditions?
It's tricky. Luckily, it's quite straightforward that it is definitely inter tires, so that takes one complexity out of the equation. But then you always need to make a decision to come in for a pit stop and fit another new one or not. It will be very interesting how everyone will solve this challenge now.
Absolutely. We'll speak to you after Q2. Thanks ever so much indeed.
And maybe if just people are confused what we're talking about, Ricciardo, I think, came out the pits and was stuck on the inside as Stroll was starting a lap. Not really sure where Daniel should have went, to be honest, but obviously Lance Stroll was on the telephone to the team, who's hopefully trying to send it upstairs, and that's just a tit for tat in the team, isn't it? And they're just trying to get one over. And I don't know where Daniel could have gone to get out of the way, to be honest.
Yeah. The trouble is he didn't go anywhere to get out of the way, and he did block Lance Stroll, but they're both through to the next round, as it were. So, and
I think that's where they'll probably just say, on you go.
Yeah.
Noted.
I would imagine so.
It wasn't malicious, wasn't it? It wasn't like we're backing you up. It was early on. But if it had been in Q3, maybe there would have been more merit in it. Obviously Hamilton trying to get a nice gap. They've got a fresh set of tyres.
What's the forecast?
Dry Q2 and Q3. Dry Q2 and Q3.
Dry?
Well,
does it mean no rain?
There's degrees of dryness. I would imagine damp to tricky would be the better description on that one.
If we get a set of slicks on today, we're in the wrong job, Crofty, because we're not predicting it.
You'll buy dinner.
I did that last night.
Yeah, you did. You're a lovely man. Right.
Go and tell people how many. Your little error last night.
We had a bit of an ordering problem.
No, you had.
Mr. 37, right. Let's go through and take a lap, shall we, with Pierre Gasly. How tricky is this going to be, Paul?
Yeah, it's going to be a bit better than it was in Q2. DRS isn't obviously there yet, but you can see the dry lines are coming down into turn 2. Big on the brakes. He stays on the rubber because I think it's the only way you can do it. You can't get to the inside of that rubber where you'd have a bit more grip. Navigate your way through here. I'd love to be on board to hear if he's going to stay flat through here. I would probably predict he is, but you can make the corner wider, and that just puts less steer and less load in the car. Bring the car back to the left-hand side. Tricky right-handed. The trickiest thing here is just stay off the exit curve, and he is absolutely not getting anywhere near it. You're at the furthest away point that we are at this track, so you're through turn 5, another 90-degree right. You just kind of head to another 90-degree right through the car park that probably was the Winter Olympics. Through another right, and then we get into a left-hander. This is where Giovinazzi had a big crash yesterday. Into the left, got on the AstroTurf, and round he went and reversed into the wall. But this is probably the hardest corner on the track to get right. Don't overdo it in the entry. Think about the exit.
I have no grip.
Stuff all right so far. So DRS would normally be open in the dry, and you can see he's just taking that long to climb up. He's 3/10 up. I can see on his dash than what he did in Q1. He would have wanted to be over where that car was. That was a bit naughty. Was that Perez just getting in his way? Probably not lost there. But you can obviously see it's a bit like Monaco, this last sector. The corners are just so tightly packed together, and you can see off camber. Horrible when it feels in the wet because the car, you just don't get the grip you want. And you can see, thinking about the exit again, compromising the entry to think about getting the car straight because of these exit curves and how flat and slippy they are. You're all over in the dry, but you can see it's all similar corners. It's just a different speed range, isn't it? But you'll be carrying extra downforce, I would think, just because of the way the conditions have been in there. He crosses the line, does a 46.6. I think that's quite a decent lap actually for your first attempt. attempt.
It's 1.2 seconds quicker than his fastest time in Q1 as well. We're not quite into the 1:45s as yet, which we were at the back end of Q1 as Tsunoda and then Russell next to cross the line. Lance Stroll is setting a decent first sector time, fastest overall, and a decent middle sector as well, as Ocon goes second fastest. Esteban Ocon 7.7 with his teammate Fernando Alonso. As I mentioned, he's never failed to reach Q3 in Sochi in 3 of his previous visits. As Stroll now goes second fastest behind Pierre Gasly, about half a second, 0.4 of a second difference between the Alpha Tauri and the Aston Martin. Lando Norris in the middle sector now finding pace in his McLaren.
Yeah, he's full of confidence in the way, Norris, isn't he? And he's got through. I don't think there was any yellow flags, even though I think it was Latifi was just off the track. But you can't react that quickly if you're already into it. There's nothing they can do about it, really. It's more for the car to come behind. But Norris, he's taking control of the car. He's making it slide. He's not letting the car slide and trying to correct it. He's the one hustling and wrestling, and that's what he did in Spa, and it caught him out. But nice to see that he's regained that, because you can just see how alive it is to the naked eye.
Lando Norris crosses the line, goes fastest overall. Meanwhile, his teammate Carlos Sainz down and 8th fastest at the moment, needs more pace there. He's failed to reach Q3 3 times, or 4 times I should say, in the last 7 races, but he has scored in all of those races, as Ricciardo now goes 5th fastest, and we can watch Lewis Hamilton around the final corner. Hamilton to complete this lap, and by a 10.5 goes quicker than Lando Norris. I'm keeping my eyes on George Russell as well, who had a fairly sedate first time lap, but a bit like Sebastian Vettel, who was also putting in a 1:51 or a 1:52 for Sebastian Vettel, much quicker on his second flying lap. Perez goes 5th fastest, Russell just coming around the final corner now goes 9th fastest, and Sebastian Vettel, who I mentioned, only a couple of tenths off Russell through the first sector. Here's Valtteri Bottas down to turn 2 we go.
Yeah, he's just caught the inside front. It's not going to stop, is it? It's not going to stop that well. But it's interesting, Perez, as the track's got that little bit greasier, there's not as much water, so it's probably not cooling the temperature. He looks like he's struggling a bit more for grip, and actually at this moment in time he's a bit slower than he did that lap time late into the session, where everybody else has got a nice new fresh set of tyres on and they've been able to improve so far.
Needs to go find a new line, find a bit more grip somewhere. Let's head down to Karoo.
Yeah, Crofty, there's no more rain, but because of these cold temperatures, the track isn't drying as quickly as it would have done, let's say, in another place we've had earlier this season, and therefore I don't think the teams are having to think about crossover points to get on the slick tyres yet. We're about 10 seconds, 11 seconds away from the dry weather time, so even when we get to Q3, this could still be a track for intermediates, which means, of course, they've got to be careful about how they use and how many sets of these intermediate tyres they use in the next 2 parts of qualifying.
I mentioned Sebastian Vettel, sedate first lap, much better second lap. He's gone 4th fastest. Valtteri Bottas we saw going off the track, even more sedate first lap as a result of that. Now he's flying.
What has he had over the past couple of weeks since he signed this Alpha contract? I mean, yesterday he was in a world of his own, wasn't he? And I mean, that is a mighty lap he's going to achieve here if he continues the progression that he's had there, and he crosses the line off the curb as well. Nice traction to come out with him. There you go. He lost a lot in the last sector, actually.
I'll tell you what he's had, Paul. Better night's sleep, knowing that he's on more than a 1-year deal, and that, I think, is very important for Valtteri Bottas. Look at that dry line that's now appearing through turn 1, as we can go back to Sergio Perez.
A bit too heavy on the brakes there, Sergio. Locked instantly, so he's just stabbed the brake pedal a bit too hard. Initially, there's no recovering it, and if it just under rotates, it shows you how much less braking efficiency you've got if they're not all slowing down at the same rate. And in the wet, it can be so frustrating. I would suspect they're going to open DRS soon, but of course the tricky thing is, how do you get through turn 12? You probably want to be shutting it before you brake, but that's what Formula 1 drivers, it should be difficult for them.
That corner, turn 10, that was catching people out in the dry yesterday, let alone in the wet here this afternoon. Lewis Hamilton has just put a purple sector in for the first sector on his latest flying lap. Here's Lance Stroll, personal best in the first sector. Lost a little bit of time in the middle part of the lap, and as he kept those tyres in a decent temperature. Pretty much so, because he gets some good traction out of the final few corners and comes home 4th fastest. He's ahead of his teammate Sebastian Vettel at the moment, and we can ride on board with Fernando Alonso. Just watch a bit later when in a couple of minutes when they make those final pit stops, Paul, and we'll see if that's that tactic for George Russell, that tactic for Sebastian Vettel. Sedate first lap, much better second flying lap and pays dividends for them again.
Yeah, so Alonso's about a second up nearly. He's 9.5 tenths up in his dash so far. This is a very good lap. And of course he's got his way through here, but he's looking confident. Fernando's coming into his own again. He's the old Fernando, I would say, when you watch the onboards.
Not reached Q3 here since the first race in Sochi in 2014. Looking a good bet for it at the moment, as Hamilton now goes fastest overall by nearly a second from his teammate Valtteri Bottas. Track improvements and maybe driver improvement combining together, a tenth of a second I should say, between Hamilton and Bottas. Meanwhile, Sergio Perez needs to be a little further up, and let's see where he can put his car. His Red Bull at the end of this lap, 6th fastest overall. I'd still say that might just be on the cusp a little bit, with the track improving all the time.
It's going to get the wall sweating if you can in this weather when it's so cold.
It is possible. Certainly get the heart rate up, won't it? Yuki Tsunoda, he thought he was blocked in Q1 as well. He's not overly happy. We saw the traffic jam as he tried to negotiate his way around it in the last couple of corners, and his latest lap, a couple of tenths down on what he needs to be into the top 10.
They all seem quite happy to be out there just doing push and pull off laps. I'm interested. This is a time where you'd have to put a new set on now, but do you get the temperature in them? Is it better to do that lap while you're backing off? You're getting that extra bulk temperature into the car because you're turning the compound on. And George Russell, he got a nice clean exit. He's gone for a lap here,
and he's just actually switched to a new set of intermediate tyres, has George Russell. His teammate Nicholas Latifi hasn't put a time in yet. Charles Leclerc we haven't seen a time from, but that's to be expected with Leclerc, with his engine penalty sending him to the back of the grid. He'll be ahead of Max Verstappen on the grid tomorrow, but Latifi we haven't seen out on the track in this second part of qualifying with just 4 minutes to go.
I think you've got to get a new fresh set of tyres on. I think the edges are just going to make a difference. They're going to reward you so much because it's just starting to dry off that little bit. And if you see the traction Russell had off the last corner, you can see already, look how far up the road he is on that time.
Let's head down to Karun.
You're absolutely right, Paul. George Russell the first to commit to a 4th set of intermediate tyres. So this is the final set of his allocation, and he's the only driver who's gone for it at this point. And as you said, on the sector tyres, it seems to be paying dividends. So keep an eye out. It's a bit tight for anyone else to come in. They have to do it now if they want to get a lap in before the end of Q2.
Yeah, Daniel Ricciardo, I don't think came in to commit. He might have done actually. He might actually be on his 4th set of intermediates now, but Russell continues on his way, and Ricciardo has set some personal bests. He's at 10th fastest as it stands. Carlos Sainz on an out lap. We'll see an improvement, I'm sure, from him. Yuki Tsunoda is just on a cool-down lap, and I don't think he's got time to come into the pits and back out again. We shall keep an eye on that as George Russell now encounters Yuki Tsunoda, who is coming into the pits and getting out of George Russell's way. So that's good news for the British driver. Of course, racing for Williams this weekend, and be racing for Mercedes next weekend, and has made rather a habit of some very fine qualifying performances this season, but he needs to improve still because he's only 11th fastest here.
I thought that was going to be a bit quicker, but it's just the last sector. He's just not quite got the speed he needs, and that's the kind of tricky part, isn't it? So the mechanical versus the aero balance. What's going to happen here? Pierre Gasly's going to get held up by the car in front.
Yeah, the Williams is kidding me.
I know it's a joke.
Yeah, what the hell is he doing?
Well, there's another driver that thinks he's been impeded, this time by the Williams, and that is Charles Leclerc, like Max Verstappen, walking away, 20 minutes ago, walking away from this qualifying session. We won't see him setting a time. Nicholas Latifi, who hasn't got a time on the board yet, is now out on the track. So they've put the pressure on Latifi here and given him quite a tough ask. Get out there, get into the top 10. You've got 1 lap to do it.
Yeah, but that's what it's about in qualifying. Sergio Perez is on a bit of a better lap here. He's done a 37.3 and a 36.5 for the mid-sector, so he's about 6 tenths down on Hamilton so far, and he's obviously into the last sector, but he hasn't been in, I don't think, and got a new set. They've just managed to keep going, and it looks like the Red Bull's a bit kinder to its tyres later on into this session.
So Alonso, Sainz and this man, Esteban Ocon, have gone in for new tyres to try and keep themselves in that Q3 picture. Currently, the pace being headed by Lewis Hamilton by 10th of a second from his teammate Valtteri Bottas. Then comes Lando Norris and Sergio Perez, who's just moved up into 4th spot. We've got a minute to go till the checkered flag, and Esteban Ocon. That's getting a lot drier, that racing line now through turn 3.
It's almost like another 10 minutes later in the session, and then later in qualifying we would have been on slicks. I'm not sure we'll see slicks in Q3. It's right on the edge, but you can see one corner can throw it all away because the Inter is such a decent working range tyre, it just gets you in. But you know, all it takes is the cloud to open up a little bit, and when the sun comes out, it dries very quickly.
And then you get, as Karim was saying, you know, you want to be on a nice warm new sets of intermediates, but a nice warm set of slicks can sometimes be better than a set of intermediates that is cooling off.
Yeah, there's just a bit too much spray out there, and I think the driver's confidence would be the biggest thing. Yeah, it's
there,
it's there,
slick,
isn't it? And then you arrive braking for turn 12, which is already in the dry. It's the most impressive, one of the most impressive places I've seen a Formula 1 car is standing, looking backwards into turn 12. As they come through, they're sparking DRS open in qualifying. It's incredible when you go out there on a Friday afternoon and watch. I mean, it's one of the places I go, wow, you know, what would it be like to sit in that car?
I remember you from last year. Hamilton puts more distance between himself and Valtteri Bottas, 4/10 between the two Mercedes drivers. Esteban Ocon would like to be in the top 4, if he could, I think, by the end of this lap. He'll see the checkered flag as he comes out of the final corner. It's top 5 for Esteban Ocon. Let's see if that is going to be good enough, because those behind him are all on flying laps. As it stands, we're on board with Daniel Ricciardo, who's the driver at risk, as you can see, currently 10th fastest, our race winner, of course, in Monza last time out. The Russian Grand Prix this time last year, he was driving for Renault, and he was the fastest driver through Q2. Well, let's see where he's going to finish up. He takes it very carefully out of the final corner and goes 7th fastest. So he's improved, puts Gasly now at risk. George Russell is improving, Carlos Sainz is improving, and that's 9th fastest for Carlos Sainz. Sebastian Vettel, what about his lap? Not really improving. He's very much at risk at the moment and could find himself knocked out of qualifying if either Yuki Tsunoda or George Russell keep up the pace. Fernando Alonso goes 3rd fastest, and George Russell now has got 2 more corners to try and ace to get that Williams up a couple of places and into Q3 once again. Out of the final corner comes George Russell, and he does make it into the top 10, pushes Sebastian Vettel out of it and gets another big round of applause from his mates down at Williams. Yuki Tsunoda will be next across the line. Can he put himself and his AlphaTauri into Q3 for the first time here in Formula 1? No, he stays exactly where he is, and Pierre Gasly has made a habit of Q3 so far this season, is going to be with him. Gasly, before this, had only missed Q3 twice in the last 17 races. That's 3 times now in 18. Disappointing session that for the 2 AlphaTauris.
It is. I think Russell did the right thing, though. He managed to do that push, cool-off push, and that was the difference between getting through. So very well done by Williams to think about that, and obviously that car working as well as it did in Spa the way. I mean, obviously it was a bit further up, but I think that was just conditions related. But what? Hard work out there for some cars, very hard work.
And Carlos Sainz makes it through by 5/100ths of a second. There'll be one Ferrari at the back of the grid, but Carlos Sainz is through to Q3 to see how much further he can go. Charles Leclerc and Nicholas Latifi in the end didn't set a lap time.
No way.
Gasly and Vettel are also out.
Oh, way. Oh!
back to qualifying here in Sochi. Only 500ths of a second between delight for Carlos Sainz and agony for the man who was driving that Ferrari this time last year, Sebastian Vettel. But that is often the way it goes. McLaren had 2 cars into Q3. We can join their team boss, Andreas Seidel, on the pit wall. Track's drying out. Andreas, are we going to get slicks or not, do you think?
Some tricky decisions here coming up shortly. I think at the moment it is still into conditions, and then we have to see how it goes.
When did they make the decision on DRS, Andreas? Do you think it would be used in this session, or do you think they'll just leave it?
With the track being declared wet, I would say they leave it like that for safety reasons.
Now, in Spa, a few weeks ago, Lando Norris was right there until we had a bit of a moment. Assuming he keeps it nice and safe, are you on for a front row? Can you match the 2 Mercedes, you think, with your pace here?
I think with what we've seen so far, I think we're still in a different league compared to us. For us, it's important to lock in 2 solid positions in quali 3 and to be in a good position tomorrow for scoring good points again. That's the main objective.
Excellent. Andreas, thanks ever so much indeed. We'll be back with you in tomorrow's race. Now, we noted that Nicholas Latifi has come out onto the track at the starts of Q2, or for large parts of Q2, but I can reveal he did come out, but didn't set a time. They discovered a pneumatic problem overnight in that Williams garage, which meant, Karun, that they had a decision to make. What was it?
That's right, Coffee. They've gone to the 4th power unit on Nicholas Latifi's car, so that's given him the penalty as well. The reason they didn't want to declare that prior to the session was that they needed to see what Charles Leclerc was going to do, because they wanted to make sure Leclerc didn't run in Q2, so he would not end up behind him, basically. So that's why they only revealed it quite late on.
Right, so a 4th power unit for Nicholas Latifi. So as it stands, be Max Verstappen at the back of the grid, Charles Leclerc, and then Nicholas Latifi.
You wonder if Red Bull would have thought slightly different with Max, given Latifi took an engine penalty as well, and was that tactical by Mercedes as well? Try and push that in there, but does that show some weakness as well from Mercedes, because there's some rumours up and down the paddock that they've got some issues themselves with engines as well and reliability? Well, we know that from yesterday with Ricardo, don't we?
Exactly, I think they've had reliability issues all season long at Mercedes. It just hasn't come to yet, where Lewis Hamilton has had to take an engine penalty, but Valtteri Bottas, of course, has.
But it counters where I think what Christian was talking about pre-show that does. This is a track they expect Mercedes are going to dominate on. Even if they came here in equal territory, this is a track they would expect to be behind. Yeah. So Mercedes know they need to maximise on this track and probably take the penalty somewhere else. If they're going to do it, I'm not saying they are, but if they were ever thinking about it, they'll choose a track that they probably think they are worse off for.
Exactly, which is what Red Bull have done with Max Verstappen. Right, if you're a Sky Q customer and you're only just tuning in to this live session for qualifying in Formula 1 and want to see what's happened so far, you can press the red button. You can have highlights alongside the live action.
So the cars that have got a couple of sets of new winters left, it would be a big choice whether you go for consecutive laps, whether you go for 2 pushes, back in the pits, another new set and go, or whether you just stay out there and do the typical push, cool off push, which you've been able to do and keep improving on through all the sessions so far. They won't need these tyres tomorrow. The prediction is the weather's going to be okay, but as that track dries out, the more laps you do, it just takes the edges off, and I don't see how a second lap is going to benefit you. I would think you want to get out there, fuel for a couple in case you have a lock-up, in case you miss a corner, but you just want to do one time lap, get in, get another new set on and get out there and try and be last across the line. That is the critical part, especially if you're P3, P4, because that could elevate you in front of the quicker guys. You know, Mercedes can't push it that much because they need to go for the safety, but that's what they'll be trying to do. I think Russell's used all his tyres so far, according to Karun, so he may struggle a bit more in this session compared to others like Fernando Alonso, who sacrificed running early in Q1.
George Russell coming out now. There's also, looking at the track, right there, there's a little bit of standing water, but nice dry line now appearing down that back straight. Remember back to Turkey last year, Lance Stroll got pole that day on the right tyre at the right time and made the best use of it. Is it worth somebody, I wonder, taking a bit of a gamble here and thinking, we'll go on to the slick tyres right at the end, because it will give us that much more pace if we've got the grip.
You would have to go on it earlier, but the problem is they're so good at seeing the data F1 cars. But yes, it's right at the point where I think you could try it, and I think if you were George Russell, I think I'd be having a go at this point. And maybe that's why he's gone out there. Maybe he'll come back in, fit a set of tyres. Yeah. But you would need to have, what was it when Hülkenberg did that pole in Brazil in 2010? He probably needed 2 or 3 laps, didn't he?
Yeah.
And that was on the Bridgestone tyre, which is probably was a bit more flexible. But you can see that the lighter grey, you can see it's drying. So you've got the temperature on the straight, which is the thing you're worried about it cooling off. But of course you've got turn 3 to contend with. Do you stay flat?
And you want to avoid all the curves as much as you possibly can. Tough choice, but Karun, someone might make it, you never know.
I agree with Paul. I think if you were George Russell, maybe even Ricciardo, guys, could think about it. The problem is you've got puddles, for example, under the bridge as you come out of turn 3 in the braking zone for turn 4. So you will have to be a bit careful. And I think they need about, as one of the engineers just said to me, you need about 3 laps to get the temperature into the set of soft tyres. So they'll have to make a decision in the next 2 minutes.
Right, so we're watching Valtteri Bottas and we're monitoring the progress of Lewis Hamilton as well. The Mercedes, as Andreas Seidel has said, in a class of their own out there at the moment. Bottas with more top 3 starts here in Sochi than his teammate Lewis Hamilton. It's 6-5. He's never started outside the top 4 here, and it was the track that he got his first win at, and his last win, and his maiden pole as well.
Crofty, I'm going to say it's dry enough. I'd commit to slicks now. I think you're going to see them going slicks. I think they're going to get a lap in and then go, yeah, there you go. It's going to be slicks. It is dry everywhere, but yeah. I think what you would want to do is just get a lap on the board, just to make sure.
Get that banker lap in, even though it might not count for much if everyone else goes to slicks. And George Russell telling the team there, prep for slicks, because he's giving that live feedback out from the track as he goes corner by corner. 1:44.7 for Valtteri Bottas, but we could be very much in that crossover zone now as Lewis Hamilton goes 7/10 faster than his teammate. He's found a lot more grip out there. Everyone is on the intermediate tyres as it stands. And Lance Stroll has just put in the best first sector time, but has lost about 0.6 of a second to Hamilton through the middle sector. Perez crosses the line, 5th fastest, Stroll's 3rd fastest behind Bottas. On days like this, never discount Lance Stroll from a very good qualifying. He seems to like it in the wet, got his first pole, of course, in very similar conditions in Turkey in last time out when we went to Istanbul Park.
I think Lando Norris would be a good bet as well if he could get on a set of slicks. You know, he works the tyres. And he was the first one to try and Spa, remember, at any point as well, and he gets himself up to P2, so why not?
Right, all is calm in that McLaren garage with 7 minutes to go. Sergio Perez down to 8th fastest now. Carlos Sainz 7th fastest.
So I would say Hamilton looks like he's going to come in the pits this lap whatever way, because he's not trying to cool the tyres as I think Bottas is. So Hamilton's obviously keen to do something, either get a nice fresh set of inters on, or there he is doing it now.
George Russell is coming into the pits to change to slick tyres as Fernando Alonso goes 4th fastest. Another good lap from Fernando Alonso, and there they are, the shiny, dry, slick tyres, red stripe on the outer extremities, soft tyres for George Russell, who of course doesn't have to go too far down the pit lane on those slick tyres, because Williams are the last garage. You can get out to the racetrack an awful lot quicker, Paul, than others.
Yeah, what's he going to have? He's probably going to have time laps if he times it just right to get across the line, but that of course depends how quick you are. But get through here, keep the temperature in them, and that's the thing, is just don't let the temperature come out the carcass and out the surface. If you can keep some in there, but you can see it's a dry line all the way down the straight, and that's the biggest thing. He's going to turn here and go, yeah, definitely the right thing to do.
The wettest part is going to be the exit of the pit lane, and you saw that as George Russell was losing the rear quite dramatically as he got the power down. So as it stands at the moment, Lewis Hamilton, who's only had 1 pole in the last 10 races, although of course he was quickest in Friday qualifying at Silverstone, that didn't count for pole, has provisional pole position from Lando Norris, who's ahead of Valtteri Bottas. McLaren on that front row at the moment, but it could change quite dramatically if others decide they're going to switch to the slick tyres as well.
Oh, what do you do?
Well,
what do you do?
Well, Carlos Sainz is coming into the pits. and I think Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris are coming into the pits. Anyone got any intermediates to put on Karuna, or are they all going on the slicks?
I think they're all going to have a go on slicks, Crofty. I can see slicks in the Ferrari garage there for Carlos Sainz. Lando Norris has been on the radio as well, saying he thinks it's slicks, so I'll be very interested to see what do Mercedes do here. There we go, McLaren going on slicks, I can see as well. So what do Mercedes do? That is the big call here.
Well, if you were Mercedes, you want to be what everyone else is on, surely.
Well, they've I think they've got to do it, Crofty, like you say. Hamilton, he's going for another lap time, of course, but he needs to bail soon if he's going to do it, because if he finishes this lap, does his in lap, then does his out lap, he's only getting one attempt at it. But looking at Russell, it's going to come right to the very end if it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But there's that light grey tarmac. You can see it's not all the way through that dry line, and you can see. But the big thing for me, the surface isn't shining, so you're activating the compound.
Yeah.
You're getting the roughness into it, and that's where the heat comes in.
Right, here we go. George Russell, time lap on the slick tyres. First driver to go for a time lap as Lewis Hamilton goes into the pits and hits the wall. Now, it's only 60 kilometres an hour, but it's such a tight pit lane entrance. And Lewis Hamilton, even before they put the slick tyres on, has bashed the wall, and that's why they're now looking at that front wing, and they might need to change it. They practice this day in, day out at the racetrack. And that's why they're having to change it, because look, the left-hand side is hanging on by a thread. Drama for Lewis Hamilton for the second year running in qualifying here in Russia. So if you remember last year, he very nearly didn't make it for his final lap in Q2 before going on to score what was a pole position on that afternoon. George Russell, 1.3 seconds off the pace, but that doesn't necessarily mean the slick tyres aren't working, because you're trying to compare a Williams to a Mercedes, and that Mercedes might not be going out at all.
As he broke a track rod or something like that, because it was quite a hard hit.
Down to you.
The problem, Crofty, is there's a double whammy there, because he blocked Bottas in the pits as well. Valtteri had to queue up, he's on his way, and Hamilton, they're now wheeling the car back into his garage. I think he's got some suspension damage.
Just hit the wall, man. Hit the wall.
Hamilton on provisional pole is championship rival starting from the back of the grid. Hamilton wanting that provisional pole to maximise his chances in the race, but has he done any damage to his car? They've managed to replace that front wing. Valtteri Bottas has got back out again, and we'll see in a few turns, Paul, whether that Mercedes is up for going for pole again.
Yeah, but the issue for Hamilton here, when he does his out lap, he's only going to get one attempt, I think, when he crosses the line, Crofty, whereas Bottas might get two, and that was the difference. Mercedes had that buffer where they could come in and get them out and do two consecutive laps, but of course when hitting the wall, that might hamper him, and of course he's in the traffic as well. He's going to have to let these guys through because they're on proper laps. So the race is on for the 7-time world champion here.
Well, he's going to have to use all of his experience and skill to try and salvage this qualifying. And I say salvage, he's still out in front. He's still got the fastest time, but now everyone else is on faster tyres. Well, if Hamilton can't improve, where would that leave him? George Russell, a 1:55.0, but he's got time to go round again, recharge the batteries, keep the temperature of the tyres, and go for one more lap. But I think Bottas and Hamilton, they've just got the one lap to try and do this. Either way, are we seeing green sectors anywhere? Not at the moment, Paul.
Not at the moment. We're not seeing enough, are we, Crofty? It's just going to come, I think, just a little bit too late. But we're seeing a green sector there. Carlos Sainz at 36.5, so that's very good. But of course, it's when you get to this bit of the lap, is it enough? And that's where Russell lost out. A lot of his lap time was in the final sector.
Because these are the slower corners and the line not quite so dry there, and the grip not quite so much on the exit.
Well, you've not got that kind of swish effect as they're going around here with the high speed. The suction isn't quite there because the downforce isn't there with their normal laps, and you can see there's just not enough traction. So has anybody fitted a new set of inters? No, they're all on the soft tyre. Everybody else has been in.
It's all going to be coming down to the last laps in a dramatic end to qualifying here in Sochi. And there's Valtteri Bottas, who took pole here in 2018, starting his final flying lap.
I can't get temperature, mate.
okay, copy Liz, just do what you can.
Hamilton struggling for the temperature. Remember, the warmer the tyre, the stickier it gets, the grippier it gets, the faster you can take the corners. How's Bottas looking so far?
Yeah, he has, but he's only going to get one attempt again. You see people like Ricciardo and Norris who are just behind him on track, I think, who could get into business, and Russell in the last sector, but it's still 5 seconds off what is pole position. 5.9 seconds, you can see.
Yeah, he's not getting the sectors that he wants so far, but that was on a cool down lap, except his last sector was the best that he put in so far, and a little bit nearer the mark as Bottas makes his way through turn 10, and we can see his teammate Lewis Hamilton going through turn 3. And on board now with Carlos Sainz, who is setting green sectors. But the man who set the fastest middle sector so far in this session is Lance Stroll. What did I tell you? These sort of conditions, Lance Stroll quite often finds a bit more grip. Sainz, though, in that middle sector, has gone 0.7 of a second faster than the Aston Martin. Carlos Sainz, never been on pole before in his Formula One career, is absolutely flying out there. Best grid spot is third. He's done it a couple of times. Oh, and he had to have a couple of corrections on the steering wheel there to make sure that Ferrari was kept on the tarmac and not going into the barriers. Right, Hamilton, we can watch on board with Sainz goes onto pole position with a 1:42.5 Ferrari on pole here in Sochi. But who's got pace behind him? Lando Norris has got a middle sector to be proud of. Lewis Hamilton is not going to improve. On the front row, he couldn't get the time he wanted. Ricciardo goes third fastest. Lando Norris crosses the line. Lando Norris is on pole for the first time in his Formula One career, unless someone can deny him. Fernando Alonso is out there. He's trying his hardest. And Lewis Hamilton stopped on the track. George Russell goes third fastest. What a lap from George Russell. Lewis Hamilton has spun on his final flying lap. Fernando Alonso crosses the line, 6th fastest overall. But a race after they got their first 1-2 since Canada 2010, McLaren and Lando Norris are back winning qualifying and getting pole position.
Absolutely outstanding qualifying session. Who could have predicted that? And the bounce back that McLaren have had from that race win, and Lando Norris put in pole position. You have to say, Hamilton's got his only himself to blame. He stuck it in the wall in the pits, and that's cost him and Bottas a good starting position because they didn't have 2 laps, and he had to let everybody else pass when he was on his outlap and couldn't get temperature. That could be costly given the sacrifice that Verstappen's taken to put him where he is.
Okay, pole position, mate. Pole position.
Oh, baby! Oh my God! Oh! Yes!
Oh, magnificent scenes for Lando Norris. Major disappointment for Lewis Hamilton, who ends up crashing on his flying lap. Let's go straight to the McLaren pit wall if we can. Andreas Seidler's with us. Told you needed slick tyres at the end there, Andreas. Congratulations. What a result for you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to the team that we followed your advice again. Obviously a great result for us. P1 and P5 is great, and obviously great positions to be in for scoring good points again tomorrow.
Well, absolutely, and you've got the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz up alongside Lando, so that rivalry is going to carry on. The 2 former teammates, first and second on the grid, and Daniel Ricciardo right up there as well.
Yeah, no, great. Yeah, first row with Lando and Carlos. I hope they manage again, similar to the previous 2 years, that they get to in one piece through his first corners. But no, it's just a great result for us. Couldn't expect that, but the team did a great job together with the drivers to get the timing right. and that's why we finished where we are right now. So really happy for the team.
Enjoy the celebrations and good luck for tomorrow. Andreas Seidel with us. What a dramatic end to qualifying that was. We'll talk about what it means for the championship in a few moments, Paul de Resta. But just after the party celebrations had died down after Monza, well, they can start to whoop and cheer with delight at McLaren again. Lando Norris recorded his best ever finish, didn't he, at Monza, and now he takes pole position for the first time in his Formula One career as well.
I felt sorry for kind of the year he's had, and he missed out on that win last time out. He was P2. But this gets him back on board. I mean, this is just going to lift him full of confidence. And I said, if you get on the tyres and you get confident, it was going to come right at the end. And credit to him, because in Spa, you know, when he was in a world of his own, he was able to go out there today, and that is a great reward for the team. And where does it stop, this projection? Where does it stop, Crofty?
Well, it doesn't need to stop.
And it's going to be a hard car to pass tomorrow, that McLaren, because when Lewis is fighting his way through from P4 in the grid, if he can start there, if he's not got damage he's picked up, you know, Norris is going to be in good shape.
It's incredible, isn't it? That brush with the wall coming into the pits has cost Lewis Hamilton the chance to, well, get his car prepped, ready for a final flying lap. Carlos Sainz was another spinner out on the track as well. I would imagine, was this before his final flying lap?
I was looking at the steering and that's fun. Stupid.
This must have been the in-lap.
Possibly. First career front row start for Carlos Sainz, and the first Spaniard other than Fernando Alonso ever to be on the front row as well. And that man there, Lando Norris, the 102nd driver to take a pole position in Formula One. George Russell, his very good mate, former rival, of course, in F2, comes over to congratulate him. But I'm sure Lando congratulated George, because he was the one that started the stampede for slick tyres, and George Russell went on to take third on the grid for Williams.
Well, it showed you how crucial it was to get a banker lap in, because it still put Hamilton on P4, that lap on the Inter, and that's where they took the security. But if you were George, absolutely the right thing to do. But that was an exciting qualifying session.
Well, that was a brilliant finish to it. In the championship then, Hamilton will start 4th, Verstappen will start 20th. Hamilton would have wanted to have been on pole, I'm sure. And Johnny Herbert was writing questions for the top 3 in qualifying today, and I'm not sure he had any preps for Lando, Carlos or George. But let's hear what he's got to say.
Look at that smile, Lando Norris, your first pole position. How does that feel?
Oh, boy. It feels amazing. I don't know what to say. Quite a manic session, but it was going well, and obviously we made the decision in the end to go slicks, but I don't know, you never think you're going to get a pole until you get it, and now I've managed to do it, so yeah, extremely happy, and big thanks to the team as well. They've done an amazing job.
Yeah, and what about the circuit? Because that must have been so tricky to get the lap that you needed to get that pole. How tricky was that circuit?
It was tough. It was tough. I'm mostly going to make myself sound good, but it was tricky, you know, because it was that crossover section, and the lap before I was like 2 seconds down, and I wasn't very confident we were going to improve on the previous lap, but I kept the tyres warm and prepared the final lap, and I risked quite a bit, I'm going to admit, and it paid off, so I'm a happy boy.
What about tomorrow then? Starting on that pole position, lovely clear track in front. How much are you looking forward to that?
I'm not really looking forward to it. Yeah, I'm not looking forward to being first down to turn 1 tomorrow. But you never know, it's going to set us up well. We're in the best position we can be in, so I'm happy. It's my first pole position, hopefully the first of many. And yeah, I don't know. I'm just really happy. I don't really know what to say.
I saw you go up to your team manager there. What did he say to you? Andreas.
I don't even know what he just said to me, to be honest. He just hugged me, and I guess coming off of Monza, this is like not something we really expected, but these kind of conditions are when we can take opportunities, and that's exactly what we did today. So, yeah, especially after Monza, this is an awesome way to start, and hopefully we can continue it again tomorrow.
Well, Lando, brilliant. Well done,
Cheers,
mate. Well done. Okay, and next up we're going to get Carlos Sainz. Carlos, how was that for you? Second place, tricky conditions, but you've got to be happy with that second.
Yeah, very tricky. To be honest, it was right from the beginning a very tricky qualifying. But right after Q2, I could see that there was a chance that the slick was going to come into play. We did a very good strategy, pitting there 2 laps to the end, getting the slick up to temperature, and then, pulled out a pretty strong lap. Unfortunately, I was one of the first ones across the line, which didn't allow me to exploit the whole track conditions, but it was still a good lap on the limit.
What about race pace? That didn't seem to be too bad yesterday. So this is going to put you in good stead for the race tomorrow. Hopefully it's going to be a dry one.
No, this weekend we're looking a bit stronger. Probably our weakest conditions has been the Inter. In the Inter we were like this to go into Q3. We still have some issues there to solve, but in the drive we've been competitive. Obviously there's the 2 Mercs and the Red Bull of Perez that are going to be much quicker tomorrow, and we expect them to go through, but we will put on a fight and try and have some fun.
How much are you looking forward to that sort of scrap down towards turn 2?
It's going to be fun. Hopefully I can get the Lando at the start, or if not, just get a good toe, because starting P2 here, the dirty side is really penalizing. So I'm going to need to make sure I do my homework overnight to make sure that we don't lose too much of the line on